Hello there. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm Toby from Ealing and Hounslow CVS. For those who I haven't met before, I'm just going to let a few more people into the meeting. Thank you all very much for joining. So I'm just going to let some more people in. Okay, so we'll just wait a couple more minutes. So James Murray is going to chair this meeting. He's the MP for North Ealing, so very delighted to have him chair this meeting, as obviously he's got quite a few more connections with the council. But just to let you know a little bit more about this project, so it is funded by the Trust for London, and this project began beginning of August, and we've been working with a variety of organisations who have activities related to housing, and also tenants and residents associations and individuals who are interested in campaigning. The main focus of this project is to empower individuals to make sure that BAME and vulnerable groups, their voice is heard when it comes to housing campaigning, both either training organisations, giving them training that they can then share with other groups and individuals, or indeed carry out campaigning themselves. So that's the aim. It's a 2-year project, and really pleased to be delivering this in Ealing and Hounslow. Of course, there's lots of housing activity, lots of building. So it's great that hopefully we should get lots of representatives from both Ealing and Hounslow councils joining us. I can see there's some chat from my camera. Blah, blah, blah. Oh, that's Fido. Okay, no worries at all. I'll just let some more people in. Hi there, everyone who's just coming through and joining. Thanks for joining the Community Advisory Board meeting for housing. We will just wait a couple more minutes for a few more people to join us, and then we can start with some introductions. And then of course we've got some very interesting guest speakers joining us, and we've also we're going to be hearing from Rena, Justice for Southall, and also Joy from Pests Ealing, which I hasten to add is nothing to do with pests. It's special educational needs children, and she's going to talk about housing. Just see who else is coming through. Okay, we'll just wait a couple more minutes for James particularly to join us, James Murray. Maybe whilst we're just waiting, perhaps we can just start some introductions. If you can just, if I call out a few names, if you can just very quick overview of your name and which organisation. So I'm just going to go at the top of my screen here. So we'll start with Fahima. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone. Sorry, my camera. I'll try to turn it on, but I don't think my face will show. You see me? Hi. I'm Fahima Zahim. I'm the director of Afghan Association Paiwand. We mainly support refugees in Northwest London and across London. And we have two semi-independent accommodation where we accommodate unaccompanied minors.
Okay, lovely.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us today. Okay, got some more people coming through. All right, and next person. Hi, Gul, nice to see you. Welcome to the meeting.
Hi, Toby. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Gil Greenslade, and I'm the chair of Green Man Lane Resident Association. That is a local resident association from Ealing Council area. And for that reason, I also sit various Ealing housing forums and in the past conducted surveys, scrutiny for antisocial behavior, housing, repairs and management, and so on. So nice to see everybody.
And also, thanks, Gul. Gul is on the board of this meeting because she's got a lot of insight into running a tenants and residents association. So thank you for agreeing for that. Okay, so the next person, Malik, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello all. My name is Malik Niazi. I'm a housing manager. I work for Paywand, as Fahima Zahin explained. I'm managing 2 houses, which are semi-independent accommodations. We accommodate youth from the ages of 16 and 21, and our houses are based in Harrow. Thank you.
Okay, lovely, thank you. Izzy, lovely to see you. Would you like to say hi?
Sorry, I'm Izzy. I'm from Housing Action Southwark and Lambeth. We're a local community group made up of families in temporary accommodation and families who are living in severely overcrowded private housing, and we're based in South London.
Okay, thanks for joining us today. And Izzy's going to be doing a presentation later, so looking forward to hearing about that. Mohammed.
Yes, good afternoon. Are you able to hear me?
I am indeed, yeah.
Yes,
Thanks for joining us.
Hi there, I'm from Anti-Tribalism Movement. I am the Policy and Projects Officer. We usually work with marginalized groups within the Somali community in the UK and abroad in Somalia. So we do a lot of advocacy and policy work in partnership with local government and also national government. So currently we're spearheading the community comic relief response, and we've recently been funded by Comic Relief to disperse some funds across the community, and we've just finally dispersed that. My background is housing for 15 years. So I worked in Harrow, Hounslow, Westminster. So I have done some work within this housing project with ATM2. That's for now I can add here.
Okay, lovely, thanks. Just reading on the chat, Joanna, yes, we invited you, Joanna. It's not a councillor meeting, but we have invited lots of councillors. So if you are able to stay, we'd really appreciate it. Okay, now we're going to go on to Shelley, who is on our board, and her role, people on the board have different roles, and her role is going to be our solutions champion, so connecting people. So thank you for joining us today, Shelley. If you'd just like to say hi to everyone.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can all hear me. And yes, I run a community interest company called Animo CIC, based in West London, Southall area actually. I've long been involved in the voluntary sector, involved in other community organisations, charities as well. Mainly the work that I do supports people from who are disadvantaged in all sorts of ways, really. It identifies the needs that people have through the problems that they that surface in their lives, and then offering up solutions to those problems, hence the reason for the solutions champion idea. But broader than that, it is advocacy and policy work, sort of lobbying government, local and national, in order to have joined up thinking really to improve people's lives.
Okay, that's great.
Sorry, I just think that that's the way forward really, because there are so many things now that the pandemic has highlighted that is wrong in our systems, in our civic systems, that really needs to be addressed. And it's all about, it's not about blame, it's all about finding the solutions. And I believe that they exist, just means identifying them, that's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Shirley. Right, I've seen we've got some more people who've joining us. I'm just going to ask them just to introduce themselves specifically, because I'm very pleased we've got a couple of people from the council here. So thank you very much for your time. So we'll just do a quick introductions to them, and then maybe we better press on with the presentations. I haven't seen James enter yet, who is going to be chair of this meeting, but that's not a problem at all because I can do that. So I'm just going to pop first to a couple of people. So Dave Baptiste, he's the head of the housing development in Ealing. So thank you very much for joining us, David. Do you just want to just say hi to everyone quickly?
Yeah, just a quick introduction, Dave Baptiste. I mainly concentrate on delivering affordable housing, new affordable housing built by the council or its housing subsidiaries. Sorry, I'm on the phone, so I couldn't get the council system to work.
Okay.
If you can hear me, then it's all
joining
working.
us. I'm just going to run through who else is on this meeting, and then we can maybe start with the presentations, and then there will be, of course, plenty of time to ask questions, and maybe if you can then introduce yourself when you ask a question. So we've got on this call, we've got Shamaki from Gossard. We have got Joy Barton from Pests, and she's going to be giving a presentation. We've got Kamal, not sure from which organization. We've got Francisco, and let's see who else we've got. And of course, Rena, who's also on our board, and from Justice for Southall, she's going to be giving a presentation. And we've got Anne from Each Counselling, and thank you, Joanna, for staying on the call. Appreciate you. You might have us on in the background, but thank you very much for staying. Really appreciate you giving some time to this. So let's start first of all with our presentation. So we have got Fido from the Anti-Tribalism organisation that's based in Acton, and they have, well, a great reputation in terms of their activities that they do. And I'm just really pleased they're able to join us today to talk about their housing campaigning. So just to summarise for everyone, the aims of this project is housing campaigning for BAME and vulnerable groups, giving them the tools they need really to empower them so their voices are heard when it comes to housing and housing planning. And we have invited quite a few other councillors from both Ealing and Hounslow. Maybe they will join us later. But I thought it'd be good to start off by hearing from Anti-Tribalism about their campaigning for affordable housing. So Fido, would you like to start off your presentation?
Yes, thank you so much, Toby. And first, let me introduce myself. My name is FIDO from Anti-Tribalism Movement, which is a charity committed to tackling tribal discrimination and promoting fair and equitable societies. We've been working with the Black, Asian, minority ethnics and communities since 2010. And also, as my colleague Adi mentioned, that recently we have published a briefing report on COVID during the height of this pandemic. As a result, we've launched a resilient grant to help BME voluntary sector sustain core service in this challenging time, where we have funded 34 organizations. I also manage a housing project which aims to empower local residents in South Acton and White City, particularly women, BME women, to engage with regeneration planning so that the local authority can adopt a sensitive and a fair approach to the needs of local residents in terms of affordability and family size home. The project also aims to the local resident in South Acton to become informed, active stakeholders in regeneration. Schemes which we have had direct potential life-changing impact on their housing, livelihood, education, social network, health and health. The program that we've been running have delivered four outcome. Improved engagement between decision makers, including developers, local authority, housing, and residents in both the states that we've been operating. And second, Somali resident, Ethiopian, Eritrean, all this BME community that live in both states are more now knowledgeable about regeneration scheme, are able to voice community aspiration and hold decision makers to account than ever before. And number three, regeneration and housing policy development are more culturally sensitive now in terms of fair and better serving low-income household and large families. And that's what the project was intended to achieve. And the fourth outcome was residents in South Acton, White City are more able to influence housing practice and policy at the local mayoral level, achieving improved outcome for larger families and low-income residents. Before we did the project, we did some research where we have found out there was some sort of the problem that we have realized was these communities in South Acton and White City, although South Acton have developed, they did not understand regeneration. Some of them, the people that we come across, their planning process, and they couldn't even read or comment on consultation documents. And there was a language barrier in terms of consultation document. It wasn't accessible to the communities in the area. A lot of community they lack capacity to engage with decision that affects their life and their houses. And also there was some sort of lack agency and ownership of circumstances which affect their life due to pre-existing mindset about authorities and collecting some of them that they hold authorities to account. Developers attempted to consultation as they told us, and often though they always tend to be tokenistic, and the residents particularly and older generation tend to be culturally, insular. So there was that problem that we identified. So we delivered 10 training on the activities that we have run was knowledge building, confidence building and advocacy skill, influencing policy, where we have trained 60 champions to amplify the voice on housing option, where we also residents have now increased knowledge, as I've said earlier. And I'm gonna hand over to my colleague Mohammed, who is also here with me, who's gonna add the rest.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, one of the, I co-delivered some of the sessions, and what I found was the concept of regeneration as a scheme was actually quite alien to this community. Obviously, in their surroundings, they do see developments around their houses, their estates, and so on, but they didn't actually know the impact such developments were having in their lives and potential benefits and disadvantages. So one of the quite actually fundamental takeaway from the project was in case where there is some degree of gentrification related to regeneration schemes, how that affects them in their daily life, in terms of their social family networks, facilities, leisure, and also to some extent affordability. So some of these issues for them was actually bread and butter issues, but before the project began, they didn't know how regeneration schemes actually materialize in their own lives. So once we were able to explain that in that context, they were able to see actually this issue was not just affecting the physical nature of their homes, but also their surroundings, their place as a sense of belonging within community. And one of the key questions that was coming back was, if my property was demolished, what is my right of return? What sort of bedroom size would I get, and how long would I be returned to the area? These were only questions can only answered by the local strategic partners such as the council. So we were able to obviously make sure that the council were able to provide those answers, and also the developers too. So that was quite a moment to take away from the project, but also we trained housing champions who then trained other residents, so that it could be a continuous learning for everybody. And out of that, there was a steering committee set up, and now at least there is 2 representatives who go into these board meetings and try to dissect any changes or have influence within. Another key takeaway was also the issue of campaigning and influencing. Some people thought campaigning was just about demonstrating, picking up placards and so on. But what they didn't know actually is you can organize as resident associations, put in petitions together, contact your local MPs or councillors, or sit in these boards. So that was also a good takeaway for them. And just lastly, one of the issue we were trying to also hammer home was these skills you're learning, it's not just housing isolated. It's not only isolated to housing. You can actually do it in your other issues that are affecting in your own lives or your communities. So we were able to say, look, it might be housing sector project, but you can do this in other areas too. So that was also something to take away from the project. And what was quite interesting was we got to know the balance of the composition of tenants. So some were homeowners. So some of them had different questions to social tenants about depreciation prices and also compensation schemes. So, we were able to provide a broad range of answers in partnership with the local developers and also the council. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mohammed. That's really interesting. I'm just going to say hi to James because I saw he's joined us now. So, hi, James. Do you want to say hi to everyone?
Hi, yeah, no, thanks so much for welcoming me today. I'm sorry I'm a little bit late in joining, but I'm really pleased to be here, so thank you.
So we just started Mohammed and Fido from the anti-tribalism, were just giving us an update on their campaigns to change policy, and yeah, it's really interesting, particularly, they were saying about thinking some people think campaigning is out in the streets and with placards, but interesting to hear that and letting people know there are other ways. So I'm just going to open it up for questions, and then after we finish this presentation, then James, if you want to, then I'll hand over to you as chair, but I'll just finish doing these questions. So who would like to ask either Fido or Mohammed a question regarding their presentation or question in general? So I think we can, if you want, try putting hands up. Yes, Shelley? Yep.
Thank you very much, Toby. I just sent a message on the chat. It was really brilliant to hear from Mohammed explaining all those outcomes and such positive results that you achieved. So many congratulations, very well done. If I may just inquire, please, you touched upon the affordability issue, and that is really high on on the community's agenda, so to speak, because so many properties are marketed as affordable, but yet they're not affordable to the common sort of person who intends to become a homeowner. It's really a sort of an elite, a phrase for the elite. And, I don't know what Mohammed feels about that in terms of the project that he ran, because affordability for marginalized groups is very much different to affordability to the average person, and affordability to people in the sort of higher tiers. So I don't know if Mohammed might want to enlighten us on that, please.
Yes, thank you so much, Fahima, for that positive feedback. I think because of the complexity of residents we had, who were both homeowners and also social tenants, more so on the social tenants, the overall assessment was, if I'm in a position to buy this property later on, I mean, what impact would local prices have on my ability to afford it? So that was kind of a long-term question we couldn't answer at that particular moment. But also bear in mind, some of them were on housing benefit. So if they were given like-for-like property as part of the allocation scheme, they were asking us what would be the increase in the prices if they were working. So there was also, these were questions only to be answered by council officers, and don't forget, they are asking questions that may arise 5 years later. So incomes change, property prices change, but what was quite positive, at least they were planning ahead. They were asking the right questions. And as you know, a housing benefit also goes up and down based on the income. So we couldn't give an exact figure on the day. But at least the project gave them an insight of what they should be looking for or what they should be asking in case those scenarios do return. On the issue of those who own their property, they had a real value. They had a, I would say, they were more afraid. They were more worried about the potential equity that they would get, and also, because there was only a limited number of them, there wasn't a sufficient number. They could, of all the group, there was only 3 or 2. As far as I remember, there was 2 in one group and there was 1 in the other group, and all 3 were sort of asking the same questions, the same. So there were those group that felt they may have something to lose at the end. On the second point about affordability in general, you're right. There is 2 tier. There is two tier within 1 tier. That's how I see it. Affordability is lumped on, it's usually lumped on affordable housing for professionals. That's the policy focus, and I think policymakers should also look at a 3rd tier, which is those who are low incomes, those who are working. And also, I might add, it did come across some of the views we received that policy at local and national level is focused on 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom. And you know, there are large families who don't have the media or professionals advocating them in columns, you know, media columns, TV. So they don't get heard as much. So I think if there's a lesson to be learned, 3 bedroom, 4 bedroom property sizes should also be part of the discussion. Just because they're not loud enough in the media does not mean the need is not there. And that was quite something to learn from the project. Thank you.
And can I, Toby, if you don't mind me, you know, in terms of one of the good practice that actually, you know, there is South Acton has been developed anyway, as many of you are aware. In, you know, we also work in White City. So the council actually came when they have had one of the local council came to us when he have heard about the project, and because of there is a large number of low-income residents in White City. And if you go and look White City, a lot of BBCs have been developed, and there's a new residents that have moved to the area, and it's really expensive, that area, and they're complaining, saying, oh, this two estate needs to be redeveloped, and if these people can be moved from the area, that would be good. So the local residents said, you are our councillor. They wrote a letter to him and say, we're not actually giving you our vote next election. Is because of first of all, the councillor actually it's no longer about protecting our issues. They're not even there's not even some sort of engagement. You only come to us when you need our vote. That's it. We don't see you until the election. So one of the councillor came to us. They set up a local sort of committee where they selected 2 of our housing champion, and now the council developing a new site. And they want to develop the whole White City, and they say this new committee that they set up, actually they're now evaluating what the area will look like in terms of the school, where the school will be, where the swimming, sports center will be, how much is going to be the cost of those houses that the house and the local council are actually developing. So those kind of engaging even the councillors is really important. You can demand, how much is going to be, the area, because if you are a low income family and the area from £500 now is 1,003, so that's not reflective.
Okay, thanks very much. We're going to have to move on, just aware of time. So I'm going to hand over to James Murray, who's going to be very kindly chairing these meetings. James, first of all, I want to say thanks for joining us, and also just wanted to point out to people who are on this meeting, I expect you can see on the side who's joining this, but I just want to flag that David Baptiste, very thankful he's joined us today because he's the head of housing development, I'm sure you know. And also Joanna Dabrowska, one of the councillors, is listening to this as well. So thank you very much, Joanna. So James, I'm going to hand over to you, and if you've got the all the papers, you see that our next presenter who's written a piece is Rena. Very interesting about the development in Southall and the lack of engagement in community languages. But I'll hand over to you now, James, if that's okay.
Great, thank you, and thank you for covering my back whilst I was late. I appreciate that. And I'm pleased that I at least caught the last bit of the first presentation, so thank you to everyone for that. So as Toby mentioned, we're going to move on to Rena now, who's going to give a presentation on behalf of Justice for Southall, and in particular it's going to be focusing on planning consultation in community languages, as I understand it. So Rena, is that okay if I hand over to you to give us a run through, and then we'll move on to time for some questions?
Yeah, that's fine, as long as I can share my screen.
Joy, are you able to do your would you like to do that? Is that okay with you, Joy?
Yes, that's fine. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay. Hi, my name's Joy, and I work for a local charity called PESTS. It stands for Parents of Ealing Self-Help Training Scheme. We support families of children with a disability and a special need or a complex need living in Ealing Borough. And we've been around for more than 39 years. Our families are quite vulnerable. They're facing many issues, including domestic violence, health, stress, loneliness, isolation, problems with schooling. And amongst other issues, a lot of the disabled children, because of their learning disabilities, they're suffering with sleep disorder, eating disorder, and behavioural difficulties too. Housing problems, when they come and they register with us, it seems to be one of the first things they ask about when they register. Can you help me with my housing issues? The families, they apply for housing, but they're having to battle for a long time to gain suitable housing, which is one of the key factors for family well-being. They seem to be waiting far too long, very limited choice when an offer is given, and they get stuck in the system because the council say, well, you have a home, so you're not homeless. Right now, we've got a mother given private temporary housing after being in a B&B for 6 months. She was a victim of domestic violence. The home she's in is unsuitable. The child has complex needs with heart problems. And I've actually been there to look at it, written 2 letters about the issues, including damp. And they've said if she leaves to go to other private accommodation, then she's on her own. We've got another mother and with her disabled child put into unsuitable B&B for 2 years. It leaves our families open, our vulnerable families open to abuse from other tenants due to stigma. And it's a big problem. There's been issues where families have been shouted at. It's just completely unsuitable for our families. I want to just touch on autism a bit, otherwise known as the hidden disability. Families living with an autistic child, they've been told that they're not considered a priority because autism doesn't affect housing. So it's just not considered at all. This is a recognised medical condition. They qualify for high rate DLA on both components, but it's totally ignored when it comes to housing. It's been identified by countless therapists, OT, social workers, that these children need their own space. And due to their high needs and social communication difficulties, it's important that they get it. I think the pressure of unsuitable housing exacerbates this, and it leads to more pressure and stress-related issues on every member of the household. It's not just the parent. And being told to put up a sheet to magically, just bring up an extra bedroom it's not only insulting, but it's ludicrous. And I think anyone who's got experience of autism, they'd be horrified at such a suggestion. And even more so, it actually came from somebody representing the council. And also to be told to give up your bedroom and sleep in the living room is another thing that we hear quite regularly. And these types of dismissive comments, they're becoming all too common. It goes really to show the lack of understanding about this hidden disability and the need for the council to learn more about it, recognise that the housing policies and criteria are out of date, and it does need to be looked at again. This is paramount. The lack of understanding and the stigma attached to disability and autism, it just makes everyday life for our parents so difficult, and it does lead to loneliness and isolation. Housing is one of the biggest problems families with autistic children face. And when you consider a disabled child in a wheelchair who's in need of suitable housing, their needs are met. They have a physical disability seen, and they get the housing that they need. So why then should an autistic child be pushed aside just because their needs are different? And why should their needs and their disabilities not be recognised? one parent, she reminded me just recently about what happened during the summer, just this last summer, to a child whose mother couldn't take anymore, and she took her own son's life. And although this particular incident was related to housing, it shows the immense pressure that disabled families are under on a daily basis. She asked me why the council are discriminating against children with autism. And they're waiting for, you know, are they actually waiting for something like this to happen before they sit up and take notice? And I thought that's a very good question. So without the council taking this more seriously, doing something about it, things will, and you know, they'll continue getting worse. I think it is full time that the council reviewed their policies and their guidelines on housing for disabled children with autism, and just bring in the experts to make the decisions, not your local GP, because their knowledge is limited. Thank you.
Thanks, Joy. Sorry, James, do you want to? I jumped in then.
Yeah, no worries, old habits. No, thanks so much, Joy. It was really useful to hear that. And I think, you know, before I was MP, I was deputy mayor, and before that I was a councillor. And I remember some cases, particularly of families where the young people, the children in the household had autism and the difficulties with that. So it was really good to hear you bringing up that situation today, and thank you for raising it. And I hope we now have a few minutes for questions and discussion about what we've heard. So if that's all right, Joe, I'll just look around the room to see if anyone else is putting their hand up, either real or virtual. I can see Steve's real hand. Would you like to ask a question, Steve?
Yeah, you mentioned about expertise, and I'm aware this is a problem that's been kicking around a long time. I must plead ignorance here and ask, have any of the national autistic organisations tried to bring any sorts of legal challenges to how housing departments are dealing with this matter that we're aware of? I'm just curious about it.
So who's that directed to?
That was to you, Joy. I think that was to Joy.
I suppose to you, possibly, Joy. I don't know.
Oh, sorry.
It's really just a display of ignorance on my part. I'm wondering, have any of the national charities ever attempted any sorts of legal challenges to housing?
Not that I know of. No, I'm not aware of any.
Yeah. I should say that, sorry, I just to explain, I'm responsible for generic floating support service and indeed a mental health floating support service in Ealing. And you're right, physical disability is a clear cut in a way, although it still is unsatisfactory in terms of housing supply, very unsatisfactory. But we have a similar issue, you know, with adults and indeed children with mental health issues, that it's easier because they take, what housing departments do is they take a very property focused, therefore there isn't a physical need in terms of, you know, they reduce everything to mobility and space and layout. You know, they don't look at that. So I'm not quite sure what the answer is, but I'm just a little curious that there's never been any sort of national, shall we say, drive on this, because that would certainly some sort of challenge under maybe, you know, disability legislation.
No, I'm not aware of any. I mean, this is a problem that's going on for quite a long time now. It's not just recent. No. And parents are just suffering in silence, really, because they feel that their hands are tied. There's nothing really they can do.
Maybe the silence is the problem.
Yeah, maybe it is. Yeah. Yeah.
So what is the policy and where is the policy? Is there I've tried looking for things like this. Does anyone have any insight of the council's policy?
Well, I presume that in terms of the process, it's about if you're going through Locata, for example, it's about filling in a medical questionnaire, and the assessment is then based upon that questionnaire. And as I said, other things like mental ill health, for example, also fall down very badly on that. As far as I'm also aware that the medical officer isn't necessarily a mental health specialist or an autism specialist. So The point made about specialist opinion, I think, is very important, but I think the policy really isn't explicit, isn't clear, doesn't have guidelines on these particular conditions and how they ought to be viewed from a housing perspective. So it allows people to reduce everything to physical.
Okay, I think Shelley might want to come in now.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. If I may, just because this is just really going to the heart of the problems that we have in local societies, they need to be addressed locally. If I may request, Mr. Murray, please, that it was, I mean, Joy, the issue she has raised, really, I mean, what can I say? This is my experience as well. It is so, I mean, so many people are suffering these issues. And if I may say, Mr. Murray, Joy mentioned about GPs. I would suggest that if you, in your capacity as a local member of parliament, please, can take up this campaign on behalf of so many, I mean, it is all encompassing. Anybody, because people that are suffering, you see, they don't have the time, the wherewithal, the financial measures to go around seeking specialist reports. The general practitioner, our GPs, they treat us for whatever issues we have. So if the GP were to give the statement that, yes, this child suffers this problem, then really the local policy should be that whatever needs to be, whatever this person needs, let's do our best to address that and provide it for them, to make their lives easier. Because just one thing, you know, we talk about less abled and more abled. So a person who has no disabilities, they're considered, you know, able-bodied. People with disabilities are considered less abled, but actually people with disabilities are more abled because they are competing with the fully abled people every day, every moment of their lives, and you know, and really without any proper support. So actually the disabled people are the more abled people because they are managing in this world without the full support that they need, getting by, whereas those that don't have disabilities, they don't know what it is to have those disabilities. So if I could just request, Mr. Murray, on the evidence of the GP's letter alone, that's all that should be needed, and the local authorities should just say that, yes, okay, we have this statement, let's do what we can to help these people. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks Shelley, and I'm happy to have a further conversation with Joy about that afterwards, particularly if there's any families you're aware of who live in my constituency who I'm the MP for. I'm happy to take up their cases with the council and see you know, whether we can have a discussion about what the policy is. That might be a good way in for me as a local MP to pick that up. So Joy, if you're happy to contact me afterwards, and we can
Definitely,
have a chat.
thank you.
That would be great. Okay, just looking at the time, I think we need to probably move on. So thank you again, Joy, for giving us that update. Toby, how are we in a technical sense in terms of the Justice for Southall presentation? Is that ready to go now?
Yes, and then yeah, we're changing it around a little bit, and then we'll have
We'll come back to
Housing Action
Lambeth
Southwark at the end. So okay, so I'm going to be Rena's sharing my screen now, so we've got it all here. So let's give it a go. Can everyone see my screen okay? Brilliant. Okay, Rena, then over to you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, and sorry everybody. So I like to start off with this picture to show you guys some context on how big the developments are happening in Southall and other areas of Ealing in comparison to the local area and the characteristics of the local buildings. So this is a development that's been pitched for my road, and as you can see, there are 2-story homes which are just home to a lot of working class people, and directly opposite they are proposing 12 to 16 stories, which is out of character for the area and a huge overdevelopment. The way in which I got involved with housing and campaigning is in March. I'd come back from university, and obviously it was the midst of the pandemic, and I saw a public notice in my local area about a development on our local market, Southall Market, and I was really shocked because it was proposing 12 stories on the Southall Market. So I went to make a comment, and this is the first time I had engaged in a public consultation, and I was shocked to see how little engagement there was, knowing how busy that market was. On top of that, I was also just shocked to see how large a scale that development was proposed to be. Obviously, after a while, I got contacted by the council to talk at the meeting, and at the meeting I did speak, and there I really understood how poor engagement was in Southall in terms of planning, seeing that no one else had even offered to speak, and again, in total, only 7 public comments had been made on a market that was over 300 years old and a valuable piece of our community. After that, I decided to start my own organisation called Justice for Southall, where I would help my local community learn how to engage in political processes, because it's one of the most basic human rights to know how to engage in democracy and have a voice. So I thought that would be a really important thing to do to help Southall and other BAME communities. In one way I did this is that on my road, I saw some public notices for this development here. And on the next slide, you can see how big the development is again, with huge towers. So what I decided to do was to campaign on my road, and I knocked on over 150 houses on my road, and I talked to each person that opened the door and explained to them the planning process and how to make a comment on the public consultation on the Ealing Council website. I was appalled to find out that a lot of people had absolutely no idea about this process. Those who had public notices directly outside of their house had no idea what they were, completely ignored them, and had no idea that flats were being built directly opposite them. A lot of people who I did educate on the process, so this was the first time anyone had politically engaged with them in their entire life living in Southall. Some of the people on my road had lived there for over 60 years and had not been educated on this simple process of engaging in a planning proposal. In Southall, there is a huge amount of development going on, and I can't imagine how many proposals have gone through with permission from the council with very little consultation from the local people. On top of that, when I was speaking to people on my road, a big thing I encountered was language barriers. Luckily, I had some knowledge on Hindi and Punjabi, so I could translate how to engage in the public consultation process to them in those languages. But had I not had that knowledge, it would have been infinitely more difficult for me to have engaged with them and taught them the process. And again, this is only 100 people I engaged with. There are far more people in Southall who have no idea about any of the processes, which is appalling. So if you go on to the next slide, you can again see that's the site where they've proposed to build on my road, and directly behind it there is a large area of brownfield sites that are being currently put towards development by different developers. These are going to be 20 to 29 stories in areas where there isn't that much housing, which means that again a lot of people won't be aware of these going up, and due to public notices being strategically put in areas near to where developments are being proposed, again, a lot of people will not see those public notices, and a lot of people don't even know how to engage in them. If you go on to the next slide, you can see that a lot of the housing that is being built is targeting 1 to 2 bedrooms and standing at a high story level. Additionally, a lot of these are out of the price range of people in my local area in Southall. The median salary in Southall is 30,000, while some of these developments that I've already gone through, for example, one on Merrick Road, which stands at 23 stories, is selling a 1-bed apartment for £2,000. If your salary is £30,000 a year and a month's rent is £2,000, that would leave you with approximately 6,000 spending money, while 24,000 goes to rent, showing how unaffordable these kind of flats are for the local area. The biggest issue is, if you go on to the next slide, is that a huge amount of Southall's population are not traditionally British, in the sense that they weren't born in England. And as you can see from these statistics that are publicly available to the council and others from UK census data, a lot of our population are from India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Somalia, Kenya, and other countries. And that correlates directly to language. If you look on the next slide, UK census data again shows that over 50% of Southall's population don't speak English as their first language, which means that they are at a disproportionate disadvantage in terms of engaging politically. And unfortunately, I've not seen, in the couple months I've been doing this, I've not seen the council do anything in terms of planning proposals or in terms of many political processes in trying to sort this language barrier out. A lot of public notices, as you'll see on the next slide, are in plain English. And also, as someone who is a law student and has worked in the legal sector, I myself have found the language in this public notice to be confusing. And I can't imagine, if English isn't your first language, how ostracizing this can be to see outside your house. Immediately, you wouldn't be compelled to look at it or try to understand it, because it's in, not, first of all, it's in a foreign language, even though you are living in England. And the language itself is very confusing. On top of that, the language itself is very confusing. So the one thing that I've had a really big issue with, and that's made me very upset, is that I've seen very little in terms of the council doing anything to solve the issue of the language barrier. When you can see statistics that are publicly available show that this is a reality in Southall and probably many other BAME areas. But councils have done little to try and solve this in terms of engaging people politically by using their language in public notices or in campaigning. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Rena. That was really good, and I think your point around making those planning notices more accessible is really well made, and the whole planning process actually is very inaccessible for many people. You know, whether it's, as you rightly point out, language barriers, also access to things online. Can people turn up at planning committees that time of day? Actually looking at planning documents online, they're quite hard to get your head around sometimes, like what the actual proposal is. So there's so many reasons why I think planning, engagement with planning and making it accessible need a lot of attention. So thank you for drawing our attention to one aspect of it. And I think, as I say, I think there are many aspects as well. So should we open this up to any questions for Rena? Sorry, I'm hogging the floor a bit because I think I thought it was really good. So who else would like to come and ask some questions? Anyone got some questions?
Well, first of all, I just want to say well done, Rena. It's very impressive. I mean, God, I wouldn't have been able to do something like that, you know, considering you're fresh out of university, and just well done. It's so impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was just wondering, Rena, thinking if you've got any thoughts for moving this forward, because maybe we should open it up to David and maybe put some questions to him as he's kind enough to join us. He's the head of housing development. So I was just thinking maybe, Rena, would you like to ask him some questions about planning in different languages?
Yep, sure. So it's just my question to David is that I know for Ealing especially, like you guys have produced reports like the State of Ealing report, which shows the language discrepancies in Southall. The UK census data is available online for everyone. Why have Ealing Council in general just not acted at all in trying to make these kind of processes more accessible to people who, in your knowledge, have language barriers? And will you guys do anything moving forward, or will you leave everything on the developer as you have done with recent developments in Southall?
Thanks, Rena. I've no disagreement with that. I suppose I have to caveat it with I have a limited scope, but whatever scope I have, I'll try to make sure that other colleagues and my own work, and as much as it is involved, try to bring some of those points home. A certain amount of what you said featured around the planning colleagues. I don't think there's anyone on the call here today, but I can certainly take that back. But the engagement point I fully recognize, because part of the work that I do is developing across what we call housing regeneration schemes, which others have mentioned today. And of course, they have a massive impact on people's lives. And in part, you showed a picture of, I think, Southall Market car park, which is close to where you live. But that is a council-led scheme. So, and it's part of the team that I work to. And I think it's 124 homes that are going to be built there.
No, I showed the image was of a development on my road called Southall Sidings. But I spoke about the market development as the first thing that introduced me to the planning process and public consultations, which is the first step in which you can engage in as a public person.
Yeah, great. My response, in a sense, is a little patchy. The point I was going to make about Southall Market car park is they're all social housing homes. There is obviously tension between not enough homes being built and the homes that are being built, question mark over affordable. But on that particular development, albeit I respect your point about the market has been going for a number of years and the homes seem quite overbearing. But on that particular point, all of those homes are social rented homes. So
I don't think they are social rented, because in the meeting I saw that it was London Living Rent, and there was also some, but London Living Rent is very different to social housing. London Living Rent is aimed towards those with median salaries upwards to 70,000, which is far different to social housing, which serves people who are low-income families who often have median salaries of less than 30,000.
Right. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right in that definition. But on this scheme, I believe our proposal is to build all what they call London affordable rents, which are the GLA or the mayor's guidance around this, which we interchangeably term social rents. So they are rents which are capped at levels which are targeted towards people who are in housing need, and it's not an income-based requirement at all. But there is, as you've put it, quite rightly identified, there are London living rents which are also capped at local incomes, and then there's a whole range of other rents. And I accept that the whole term, the banner affordable housing, is overused and really means a lot of things to different people. But my area of work actually concentrates on social rent and low income type rent. But in order to deliver those, sometimes there has to be other homes built to create that cross subsidy. But I'm not disagreeing with anything that you said. I think on the point of participation and how people are able to access information and that information being expressed to them, I fully agree with, and I'll take that back on behalf of the council. I'm not saying that there's instant change, but there seems like some easy things that could be done. And I'll certainly pick that.
Yeah, well, I think thank you, Dave, because I appreciate I think it's helpful to have that way into the council for people in this group. So I think I can say on behalf of the group, thank you for taking that back to the council. I think that's really good. Is there anyone else? We've got a couple of minutes before.
Can I come in here, and then I'm gonna. I see Sharmaki's raised his hand, so I'll let him go next. But I just wanted to come in here very quickly, just to say that I was looking at policy from Ealing Council with regards to engaging the local community in community languages, and I could only find one very old document from 2006. So if Dave does have any access to any updated ones, I'd really appreciate it if he could share them back with me. And I've also thought of some practical solutions, because I know Peter Mason is using some new software, Commonplace, which can pick up comments on social media, and he's using that for LTNs, low traffic networks, and well, that's another story. But with regards to consultations for housing, I spoke to the company Commonplace, and they're currently looking at using other languages for it. They're doing a trial in Welsh, so I'm really keen to do a trial with them using Punjabi and other languages in Southall. We can then connect to people, particularly in this time when everything's online. So that would be a great way of moving forward with that. And also I'd like to see on Zoom meetings or to do with planning, that if we were to connect to those people in the future, that there's some translation facility, and it's very easy for the council to do that. You know, you see when, you know, at United Nations where people just plug in and then they can talk to different people. So those two initiatives and ideas, I really be pleased if Ealing Council could look at them, particularly thinking of that connection there already with Peter Mason being part of Commonplace and moving that forward. So that's enough of me talking, and I've just got, sorry James, a few people are messaging me saying if they're wanting to speak again. So Rena just wants to say one thing, and then we're going to go on to Sharmaki, if that's all right with you, James, as I'm taking over your role. Rena, do you want to just say one more thing?
Yeah, I'll be really quick. Just to touch upon what James had to say, although I'm focusing on language barriers, whilst I was campaigning, I met a lot of young people like myself who actually had written a comment on the public consultation. But when I tried to explain to them what I was trying to campaign about that day, they told me they'd sign a petition or this and that. And there's a really big gap in political understanding around the planning process and around a lot of processes around the council especially. And I think one of the roles of councillors, and if you are a councillor at this meeting, should be that you should engage with the people in your constituency in a better way. You should try and educate them on political processes that really affect their lives, like housing, like elections, because the power you guys have, even though you're not paid for your roles, is really huge, and you should really work on engaging young people like myself in understanding the process better so that they can have a voice, because at the end of the day, these kind of developments are our future. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Rena. And then I think Sharmaki, did you want to come in?
Sharmaki, yeah. I think all the presenters have done a good job, ATM and everybody else. Just to comment about what's happening in Southall. GOSAD is based in Southall, and we deliver kind of accredited housing advice. So hopefully, Joy, we can talk later. We helped somebody before with a child with autism, and they're able to give in a property. So that's something, maybe some of the actions. You know, the problem in Ealing, and we've done a report of the impact of COVID-19 on Ealing BME community, and I think the MP host has got a copy of that. I think the problem is that where, for example, we are based, there's a lot of organizations. And when gentrification started to happen, we were completely ignored. We had actually to campaign, speak to the leader of the council, and even that planning, was done in a way that it didn't give opportunities to community groups. And the issue around, political involvement and civic involvement, the problem is that the ward, basically, it's not a blame, but I think it's something councillors don't do. If you attend the ward forums, you hardly see representatives of the community. You just see sometimes maybe business owners, and you don't see people who maybe speak other different kind of languages. So I think, more needs to be done. And also with the council, and part of our recommendation in the report, you might be surprised that Ealing Council doesn't have a tenancy strategy, which is very strange. By law, they should have one. And also, I think they're missing, there's another strategy on looking at needs of residents. Also, they're missing that. So as a local authority, there's a lot that needs to be done. And through our advocacy support, for example, helping almost 600 people just this past year, secure, different kind of properties. We had to fight nail and tooth, actually, in some situations. We encountered, racism, a lot of stuff from the council for some of our users. So I think it's a bigger issue that I think the MP and others need to. And I think the lady who gave a presentation about voice for Southall, I think should be voice for Ealing residents, because people don't actually engage properly. And sometimes there's the exercises which are done. For example, some of the consultations are kind of tick boxes, and you just see reports, for example, from the local strategic partnerships, where you don't see a lot of representation from the community, and you see a lot of documents published where they've actually admitted that they've consulted with the communities, but they haven't actually. Or if they have, it's been done in a very selective manner. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Shaman, for that. Now, just conscious of time, so we might go on to Izzy, if that's okay. With kind of funky headphones there. Very, very cool. Izzy, I think you're going to talk to us on behalf of Housing Action Southwark and Lambeth about engaging with Southwark Council, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much. Thank you for inviting me. It's so interesting to hear about all the issues that the other presentations, and everything you've raised. We have direct experience of here in South London as well. So these huge development schemes that are kind of unaccountable, and all this misleading language that's used, right, about social housing, London, living, rent, whatever. So it gets really confusing. It's hard for people to engage with. And then the use of bed and breakfast accommodation for homeless families, that's another issue. We have a lot of experience in Southwark. A few years ago, Southwark were one of the worst councils. They had the highest number of families living in bed and breakfast accommodation. And actually, if it's privately run bed and breakfast accommodation, the law says that families should only be housed in there for 6 weeks. And so councils shouldn't be using bed and breakfast accommodation at all, and it should be for a maximum of 6 weeks. And we highlighted this with the council. We tweeted about it because we knew that they're keeping many families in bed and breakfast accommodation unlawfully. And actually, over the last few years, they've improved it and they've stopped that practice. And so, yeah, it's so interesting to hear like such similar problems in North London. We're in solidarity with you in South London. We're experiencing them as well, and we're finding tactics to challenge them and to fight for our housing and homelessness rights. I guess issues around translation as well. In our group, lots of people don't speak English as a first language. So it was just really interesting to hear all of those experiences because we can relate to them so much. But I'll just start about Housing Action Southwark and Lambeth. We're a community action group made up of people directly affected by housing problems. So most of our group are people living in temporary accommodation provided by the council. So they're homeless, but they've been given temporary accommodation. And the other families are severely overcrowded in often private rented housing, or we've got quite a few families who are very overcrowded also in social housing. And obviously this level of overcrowding is caused by high private rents, a huge shortage of 3, 4, 5 bedroom council housing, benefit cuts has forced people into overcrowded housing. So in our group, those are the 2 main housing problems that we face. And I think Toby said that there'd be some housing officers here. And as people who deal with housing, there's a new law called the Homelessness Reduction Act. And that has made things incredibly complicated. Like housing officers struggle with it, housing lawyers struggle with it. So in our group, we help each other to understand our rights, to assert those rights. And we want to get to the two main problems we face, like overcrowding and families in temporary accommodation, with lots of families waiting for years and years and years on the housing waiting list. The root causes of this is the lack of secure, high quality council housing. And as Mohammed said, this council housing needs to be 4-bedroom, 5-bedroom, right? 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom, 5-bedroom. There's just simply not enough family-sized council housing. And as Rina said, all these new developments, they're all 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom. They're not, and they're private, they're for sale for hundreds of thousands of pounds. The solution to the housing and homelessness crisis we face is high quality 3, 4, 5-bedroom homes, council homes. And so in our group, that's kind of like our slogan. And so, in our group, there's the sort of main housing issues we face. Reflecting those worst affected by the housing crisis, lots of our members, or the majority of our members, are migrant women of colour, and most of them don't speak English. So in South London, we have a very big Latin American population, so lots of our meetings are in Spanish. And then we also have a woman called Fozia who translates in Arabic and Somali, and she can speak Dutch and English. And so luckily with Fozia, she helps us with translation as well. So most of the people in our group don't speak English as a first language, but luckily people donate their time and help with translation. And so our group is member run, like everybody in the group is dealing with housing problems, but they're able to participate in whatever way they feel able to. And so it's actively run by all of us together. We used to have regular physical meetings, so we'd have a hall and there'd be 100 people in it, and we'd have those meetings two times a month. And in those meetings, we'd be able to talk about our housing problems, share rights information, support each other, give moral support, and make plans on our individual cases, and also to build wider campaigns, because we're all facing similar issues. Like lots of people are facing issues of overcrowding, or a while ago, there were lots of families in bed and breakfast, or another common issue is that families are housed far out of the borough in temporary accommodation and face a very long journey to school. So we had a campaign saying we need a home close to school, where we're asking Southwark Council to bring back families back to their home borough. So yeah, we'd have these meetings in real life. Obviously now thinking back, when you think of social distancing, I can't believe those meetings ever happened. So we're very, very busy. But now we've adjusted and we're having these meetings on Zoom, and our members are really skillful in still creating this really supportive, collective environment on Zoom meetings where people feel comfortable speaking about their housing problems together. As well as these Zoom meetings where we support each other, we every day we're giving help and support in South London with housing problems. So we help people to find good housing lawyers to work on their case. We help people to understand letters that they've got from the council. We help with housing register applications, just providing moral support. People tell friends about the group. We run housing rights workshops, and then we build these local campaigns. I guess I'll talk a little bit more about some of the tactics we've used with Southwark Council as a group that we found quite effective in having our issues heard. So I guess, yeah, we completely recognise that the root causes of the housing crisis can be outside of the local council's control, and that councils are under quite a lot of pressure themselves. But there are policies that local councils can implement on housing and homelessness that can make a huge difference to their residents' lives. And for example, Ealing Council should clearly look at their use of bed and breakfast accommodation for homeless families. That's something they can do. That's something that they should be putting time and effort into, is securing suitable temporary accommodation that's self-contained and that's in the borough. So there's local things that the councils can do. So I meant to say a little while ago, I guess in the group, when I was doing the introduction about the group, I guess we've seen our members get council housing and how life transforming that is when a family has a secure council home in their community. And that's why we campaign very strongly. That's why we talk about 3, 4, 5-bedroom homes, because we've seen firsthand the difference it's made to people's lives. And so in terms of tactics, I think truthfully we don't have a particularly good relationship with Southwark Council. They know we exist as a group, but we don't get along that well. But they have to engage with us because we don't go away. So our group's been going for 7 years now. I think very early on in the group, we noticed that there was quite aggressive gatekeeping when homeless people went to the housing office. So people go to the housing office and the council have a legal duty to open a homelessness case if they believe the person is homeless and priority need. The council is just turning people away without opening homelessness cases, without giving temporary accommodation. And so for a month, we leafleted daily outside the housing office, speaking to people, telling them about their rights, going into the housing office with them to try and advocate on behalf of them. We would tweet about it and to the councillors saying, what's going on? Why is this family being turned away from the housing office when they're homeless? And we'd also contact the housing manager to raise these cases. And through that 1 month of regular leafleting and practical support alongside homeless families, it did stop the gatekeeping. Southwark, the atmosphere inside Southwark's housing office improved a lot, and people told us that. And so you can get direct results from some practical action. I think a little bit later on, we were invited to a meeting with the manager of housing manager of Southwark Council. And we attended, we prepared for it, lots of families attended with housing problems. And I think we went to a lot of effort, and we didn't really get much from that meeting at all. I think the council could say, well, we've engaged with this group. For them, they got something from it. They like to tell people, oh, we engaged with HASL, we've engaged with them. For us, nothing very concrete came out of it at all. And so for us, having meetings with the council didn't feel so much of a good use of our time, because we wanted to see concrete actions, So when they asked us for future meetings, we sort of said to them, well, we've got this case. If you help us to resolve this case, then we'll consider meeting with you. But we just need to see something happen first to have kind of trust that something useful will come out of our time. Lots of people in the group have children, they have medical problems, they have work, they're dealing with housing problems. Like, there has to be a respect for our time instead. Whereas for the council, that they're paid staff, this is their job. And so we didn't find meeting with the council that useful. So instead of that, I guess, if in people's housing cases, if the traditional routes of complaining, contacting housing officers, legal routes that we'd pursue, if they failed, then sometimes we would do group protests together. And so the placard waving that Mohammed and his colleague was speaking about actually can be a useful form of action. It's quite inclusive. Lots of our members don't speak English as a first language, so it was a nice way for them to be involved in something, and it was a way for us to do things on our terms as well. And these were quite effective. Like, we'd do a group protest with 50 people in half term, so there were lots of children, and we go to the town hall, and the housing manager came and spoke to us, and our members could explain about their situations and make simple demands on their cases, and a lot of the time, yeah, those demands would be met. And so we found that quite a good tactic that people also quite enjoyed. Another approach that I think is really important in securing the rights of homeless and badly housed people, and that's also useful for campaigning, is working alongside housing lawyers, and maybe, like, if there's a local law centre in your boroughs, because of legal aid cuts, actually securing access to justice, law centres, they've really struggled. So actually it's really hard. So Joy's clients, like, it sometimes can be hard to find housing lawyers, but there are lots of good ones still out there. And so it's really important to be aware of that. So we've worked closely with housing lawyers. We have Southwark Law Centre here, and during COVID, the one woman from Southwark Law Centre was having weekly meetings with Southwark's housing manager just to hear what was happening, what was going on. So Southwark Council had over 100 families living in hostel accommodation before coronavirus. Obviously, when coronavirus happened, they had to rehouse all those families into self-contained temporary accommodation. And so with these phone calls from Southwark Law Centre with the housing officer, we're able to get updates on that. We're able to feed in the issues we were seeing on the ground. So that was quite a useful tactic, having a point of contact, the housing manager in Southwark Council, communicating weekly with Southwark Law Centre. In Southwark, there's also a Southwark Homelessness Forum that happens every 2 months with the housing manager, council staff, and then lots of local advice services and community groups, again, where we talk about housing and homelessness issues. And that was quite a useful thing to happen, where we can just try and get direct answers, raise our questions, raise our issues. And then more recently, as I said, overcrowding is a very big issue, both in the private rented sector and social housing for our members. And so under COVID, we haven't been able to protest. So we did a postcard protest in support of one of our members. So we had these postcards, and everybody took photos and shared the photos on Twitter as a way to have sort of a collective response and public support for our members' case. And then we sort of did a more, we did a more formal campaign on overcrowding, because we'd seen Southwark Council have been making lots of bad decisions and where they were blaming families themselves for causing the overcrowding. And so instead of recognizing that high private rents, welfare cuts, and a shortage of social housing was the reason why families are sometimes in a one-bedroom flat, sometimes a studio flat. We know families who are living in one room, sharing kitchen and bathroom with other families because that's all they could afford. Instead of understanding those issues, Southwark Council started to blame the families themselves, saying, well, you chose to live in that condition. In one particularly bad case, a woman's husband had been unlawfully deported by the Home Office, and so was deported back to his previous country. And then when he returned, he got a lawyer and was thankfully able to return to his home here in South London. And they were very overcrowded. So they told the council about this, and they said, oh, well, you caused your overcrowding because you returned home. And so this is the level of the deeply insulting, hurtful decision letters that families were getting from Southwark Council. And so we had a number of these. And so with Public Interest Law Centre, who are a law centre that again work across London, across the UK, that we have a very good relationship with. And with them, we were sort of saying, we need to get to the root causes of this. We challenge these decisions. So with each negative decision, blaming families, we would review them, we would threaten with legal action. Eventually the council would back down. But it was just happening again and again and again. And we wanted to get to the root cause of this. And so we made an open letter quite recently, and 30 other local community groups signed their support for this letter, and we sent it to senior housing officers and councillors as well. We had just some very reasonable demands and raising our concerns about the treatment of overcrowded families. And so we got a response recently from the council, which was quite unsatisfactory. So we're planning the next steps of our campaign on this. So I think what we're going to do now is have a Zoom meeting with families and the community groups that supported the letter to plan what to do, how we want to respond. And so we're going to develop this campaign as well. Then recently, I think the local Labour group hosted a meeting with the new leader of Southwark Council, and there was over 100 people there, and we turned up at that and we asked them about our open letter. So just, I guess, some of our tactics or some of the ways we've engaged with the council, sort of a variety of tactics, and just making sure that you're not going away and that there's a really strong presence. And so, yeah, we've done collective support and action with those affected. We tweet a lot, highlight these issues on Twitter. We've been working with law centres and other legal aid lawyers, and then we do protests and campaigns. And so, yeah, those are just some of the issues that we have, some of the tactics or ways that we found quite useful in raising the issues that homeless families and severely overcrowded families face here in South London. So.
Thank you very much, Lizzie, and thank you for giving us perspective from the south of the river and seeing how some of those lessons can reflect experience. I'm sure many people on this call. We're buffering up against the end of our time, but I think it'd be nice to have some questions for Izzy. So if everyone's all right, just to run on a few minutes, if that's okay, just so we've got time to ask Izzy any questions. I saw in the chat box, I think Gul wanted to ask a question or make a comment. Gul?
Hi, yes, first of all, thank you so much for all the presentations, and it was very, very useful. It is rather a quick comment about the new build properties and planning, basically. One thing to keep in mind, and we found out ourselves, the whole regeneration process is a very, very long time kind of commitment. I mean, here we had in the beginning, initially, we had complete community engagement with the Ealing Council. There was a consultation and there was meetings and also an open day. All the residents were able to go and see the proposed buildings, and they were even allowed to tick one or the other project. And there were non-stop information, and we were talking and everything. But that is a very long process. Over 7-8 years period of time, when we reached the second phase, suddenly things changed. So what we were told, such as every resident, if he or she chooses to do so, can move to new build. Nobody has to leave the area at all. And that changed. In phase 2, we were just saying, oh, but in the new build, there aren't enough one-bedroom properties, so you temporarily have to move out. And then we have the commitment so that you can come back. In time, that commitment changed too. We will do our very best to move everybody back to the area on the last phase if they choose to do so. So basically information changes and we don't get enough of it. And from time to time, we didn't see any logic in that, because one-bedroom properties were a certain number, of which Ealing Council surely knew about that. How many one-bedroom, how many two-bedroom, generally in the estate. If things change during the time, that means either two things. Number one, the number of one-bedroom properties suddenly doubled during this period of time, which is physically and logically impossible, or something changed in the planning process. I don't know if it was the allocation of the social housing. Was it 30% in the beginning? Did it shrink to 20%? We don't know, because we never get that information. Even we ask that. So the reason I'm talking about that, when you see a planning permission, when you engage with the residents, things don't stay as they started. And that is a very, very serious concern, I'm sure, for all the areas, not only for our residential area. So I just wanted to raise that issue. If something is changing, perhaps we should know, not last moment, but previously, and what's changed, why did it change? Okay, thank you.
No, thank you, Gil, for raising that. And what I might suggest is we'll just see if there's any other comments, and maybe you can come back to respond to Gil and any others altogether. So are there any other comments you'd like to come back on? Steve, I can see you raising your hand.
I would just observe that one of the common problems where the number of social housing units seem to dwindle during the process is that developers come in and pitch to get their planning permission based upon a certain amount of social housing gain, but it's very, very common thereafter for them to try and renegotiate the amount of social housing gain down on the basis of claiming that the scheme is no longer economically viable. And there have been many instances where people believe the strength of the viability argument was, shall we say, tenuous at best. I see Izzy nodding head, but this is a very common phenomenon. It happens time after time. If you took the promised social housing gain for London over the last 10 years at the start of planning processes against the actual delivered, the difference would be substantial.
Thanks, Steve. And any other comments? Or no, that's great. Izzy, would you like to come back a bit to what Gil and Steve said?
Cool, yeah, just a really quick response, and maybe you both sort of covered it. Yeah, how these things constantly change, these consultations, sometimes they're a bit of a scam, aren't they? Like it's all quite dodgy what's going on. I guess the one positive thing about this constant sense of change, how the rules are changing all the time, is that we can change it, right, as well with campaigning. And so with Elephant and Castle, there's Elephant Castle shopping centre that's now being closed. It's going to be demolished, turned into private houses. And I think, I can't remember what it was. They promised to build like 7 social rent housing, but through campaigning and through engaging with the planning process, and I think also there was a legal challenge that the organisation Public Interest Law Centre that I mentioned before, they took a legal challenge against the planning application, I think, and it actually saw an increase in social housing. So this is our opportunity as housing campaigners to do our best at these consultations and these planning things. They're so complex, and they're purposefully done this way, right, to disempower us, but it's kind of up for grabs, right? It's up for us we can campaign, we can influence it, and we can get those numbers of social housing or council housing. I guess like all these different words for it also kind of creates more confusion. So in Hassel we talk about council housing because you can't change the terms and conditions of that, but we need the numbers of council housing to increase, and again they just need to be 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom, 5-bedroom, family-sized council homes. So it's up for us to influence and shape and campaign.
Great, Thanks very much, Izzy. I think we've run over, so Shelley, I can see you indicating that I might draw it to a close if that's okay. Just I think, unless you want to come in very briefly, but it must be quite brief, just to run over a bit.
Just briefly, Mr. Murray, please. Thank you. Just, listening to all of this, I mean, we hear it all the time. If I can request everybody that perhaps if we start to, just talk to these powers that have our lives in their hands, and say that, look, you are a human just like me, and if this was happening to your spouse, child, parent, whatever, how would you feel? And let's just, why have all of this animosity and aggression in society? We can just solve these problems. Solutions, they reveal themselves. And I think if that was the spirit more in civic society, in our institutions particularly, then maybe we would all lead better lives. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Shelley, and that's a nice note to end on. So it just remains for me to thank everyone who's given presentations today. I really appreciate giving up your time and informing us and opening the conversations about all the areas that you've covered today. I think we've had a really good conversation, which has jotted on a few really important issues, and I'm sure there'll be a lot that comes out of this meeting. I'll just check in with Toby in case there's anything he wants to say about future meetings or about the group.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks, James. And yeah, the next meeting will be in January, which is a bit scary. But if anyone would like to present, well, first of all, yeah, want again to thank everyone who presented. Really interesting. Thanks very much to all our presenters. And if anyone would like to present at the next meeting, then please do drop me an email. But I thought it was really interesting. Great to connect to Dave. Really appreciate Dave Baptiste joining us. And yeah, maybe myself and Rena can connect with him again. And it's great to have that sort of pathway through to the council, particularly with planning and in community languages. That's something we can really focus on and get moving, just something to make some practical steps forward. So yeah, just wanted to say thanks again to everyone for joining.
Thanks everyone, and see you in January if not before.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thanks everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.